Welcome to Vermont Today. I'm Terry Girolman, and this month I've decided to devote the entire show to the upcoming election on November 4. After many hours of interview and much research, I've decided to endorse Anthony Pollina for governor of Vermont. So the entire show this month will be devoted to my interviews with Anthony and his response to my questions. Some people think that Bush may invade Iran before the end of his term.
Yeah.
That will certainly make things worse.
Yeah, and sometimes, when you think about it on a purely, I hate to be cynical about politics and politicians, but, sometimes you tend to see a lot of saber rattling, a lot of threats of war, or sometimes, actual military action being brought up as we get closer to an election. Because I think one of the theories is that if we're in the midst of a war or there's that tension is so high, the country will be more, meaning voters, will be more likely to, number one, stick with what they've got, which would be Bush, or the closest thing you can find to Bush, which would be McCain. So, I think to, go to war with Iran would obviously be a mistake. But I think, or I fear, to tell you the truth, that some of this, just some of it, is political posturing on the part of the Bush administration. Because, we live in a very fearful time. Fear of terrorism, is pretty strong amongst a lot of people in this country. And I think when people are afraid, they're less likely to be active on a political grassroots level, and they're more likely to stick with sort of a militaristic view or the idea that we should not engage in real change. So I think that we need to realize that the way we're going to get out of this war and the way we're going to at least do our best to keep out of wars in the near future is to change the attitude of our national government and then change the attitude of our state governments as well, and so we can focus more on what we need to do here at home.
And you pointed out that some of the National Guard's people joined the Guard in order to get an education. Wouldn't it be nice if they lived in France? They would have an education for free, and they wouldn't have to join.
Well, that's true. When you put it that way, it's true that a lot of the folks that I've talked to say that they joined the Guard in order to get particularly educational benefits, sometimes job training. And it shows you that when people are, struggling to make ends meet, they are more likely to turn in that direction. A lot of the advertising, and I have nothing against the National Guard. The National Guard serves a purpose, which is to protect us here at home. My concern is that that's not what it's doing. It's being that these folks are being sent overseas to a war that they frankly didn't sign up for. So this is not a criticism of the Guard, but there is a growing movement towards using the military as a way to get your education and get your job training, because we're cutting job training programs. We're making it harder for young people to afford to go to college. And as you said, in most other nations, they would be, the cost of a college education would not be an issue. And job training programs would not be as much of an issue. So you're right, it all does it very much ties together. And having a federal government which cuts needed programs, puts a lot of pressure on individuals who can't afford college, can't get the health benefits they need, don't get the job training they need, makes them more likely to turn towards the military as the place to get their experience. And again, it's not so much a criticism of the military or a criticism of the Guard. It is a criticism of a federal government which limits our opportunities in such a way that more people turn towards the military to try to create a better life for themselves. And unfortunately, many of them end up with, other long-term issues, post-traumatic stress syndrome, or making the ultimate sacrifice.
For many years now, Oregon has been the only state to have a death with dignity law, which allows doctors to help their terminally ill patients determine the time and circumstances of their death. Some countries in Europe also have such laws. It has been suggested that Vermont should enact its own such law. What is your position on this?
I do support death with dignity measures. Again, I don't honestly feel right now like qualified to speak specifically as to what they should be or how they should be regulated. I have had conversations both with just individual citizens as well as with some healthcare providers. And I think it's important that people be able to make those choices for themselves in a way that is, I don't know, I want to say in a commonsensical kind of way. I think we have to be careful about these decisions, but I think that I know that we have a lot of people who struggle with end-of-life decisions and end-of-life care, and frankly, a lot of people, and I know I have friends of my own who have struggled with this decision. We had very close friends who they were neighbors of ours. Our kids grew up together, and over the period of the last few years, both of the parents struggled with this question at different times. And one of them, frankly, used a lot of measures to extend her life as long as possible, and clearly I respected that and loved her dearly and appreciated what she was trying to do for herself and her family. She passed away, and then at a future date, the husband, the father in the family, found himself in a similar situation. And he chose not to, this is the way I would phrase it. Again, I don't know the technical terms, but he didn't take extraordinary measures. He decided to not take a lot of medication. He just felt like it wasn't working and it wasn't the best thing for him. So that it was not a death with dignity in the technical way that people are talking about, where the doctor would oversee a death, but it was a person's decision to allow the natural process to happen without a lot of delay, I guess is the way I would put it. And I respect both of them for being able to make the choices that they made. And I just think that with advances in medicine, as remarkable as they are, we find that a lot of people are extending their lives, but are concerned about the quality of their lives in those final years or months or weeks. And I think it's important that people be able to decide for themselves, how it is they want to handle those last days. I think also, obviously it's a very emotional issue for a lot of people, and it does raise a lot of moral and ethical questions for a lot of folks, and I respect that. I've run into a lot of people who've said, I just can't believe that you would support that, or I could never support that myself, and I respect those opinions. I think that this is the kind of issue that it's very personal, but I don't think that should stop us from giving those persons the ability to make those choices for themselves. And I would hate to see that kind of issue be the kind of issue that, divides us or tears us apart on a political level, because it tends to be emotional for a lot of people.
The law in Oregon is much more restrictive than the law in the Netherlands, for example. And we pride ourselves as being a free country. Don't you think that Americans should have at least as much freedom as the people in Holland have to decide whether the quality of their life is worth continuing? Or
yeah, I mean, I don't know what the different laws say in different places, so I can't speak directly to that, but I do think that here in the United States, people should have the ability to make those decisions, for themselves. Again, I can't speak specifically to either the issues in other countries or how it would relate to the medical providers, but I do think that we find ourselves in an interesting situation in terms of this time in history, where, as I said, we have the ability to provide medical treatment that could keep someone alive for a long time, but if it's not the quality of life if it's not a quality of life that these folks can enjoy, I'm not so sure I understand why we would choose to do that. I mean, again, it's a tough issue, but I do think it's important that people be able to make those choices, and I don't think we should extend life for simply because the medical technology is there, if the quality of that life is deteriorated to the point where that person is no longer enjoying it, or can no longer enjoy it.
Well, that's all for this month. Thank you for joining us. and I hope to see you again next month for another edition of Vermont Today.